In Northern Ireland last month, the EU's Brexit negotiator taking soundings from Northern Ireland politicians and business leaders. Today, Maroš Šefčovič unveiled the EU plan to soften checks and controls on goods passing between Britain and Northern Ireland.
We have completely turned our rules upside down and inside out to find a solid solution to an outstanding challenge. I am convinced we could be in the home stretch when it comes to the protocol.
The EU says its new proposals will cut by 80% the different types of checks on goods entering Northern Ireland from Britain and reverse some bans on products too. Talks will follow, but EU figures say they're not sure they trust the UK anymore.
It's a great deal for this country.
Drawn up in extreme haste.
The Brexit deal Boris Johnson said the country must back, now being rubbished by his Brexit minister.
This deal, above all, means certainty.
But the world has now moved on.
Today, the chief advisor at Boris Johnson's side at the time of the negotiations said the government never intended to fully implement the Brexit deal it had signed. Dominic Cummings tweeted, "Good faith, blah. It was international diplomacy versus people trying to cut our balls off. Of course there wasn't good faith, you clown. Newsflash, cheating foreigners is a core part of the job." But that's the very latest.
Cheating foreigners is a core part of the job. They thought, well, we need a deal in order to fight an election, so we'll take whatever deal's on offer and we'll try and find our way out of it afterwards, which is what Dominic Cummings is suggesting certainly was in his and David Frost's mind. And, you know, that, I'm afraid, if that was the approach, and the EU, I think, fear that that was what happened, it's not going to make resolving this issue any easier now if they feel that the original deal was done in bad faith.
Those comments are very alarming because that would indicate that this is a government and administration that acted in bad faith, and that message needs to be heard around the world.
There will not be checks. I speak as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
That the protocol represents a moment of EU overreach.
Supporters of Lord Frost say his combative approach is what won today's concessions from the EU and could win more.
Did you negotiate in good faith yourself?
We negotiated to find a result, to get an agreement, and of course looked at our actions. We've spent hundreds of millions on implementing this protocol.
The government argues that anger in the Protestant community about the checks on imports from Britain is what is driving its approach to negotiations. Some in the EU think the government helped to stir that anger. When Boris Johnson was saying this was a fantastic deal at the beginning, it was a suggestion. Some people in the DUP thought it wasn't that bad a deal. You could have the best of both worlds.
I don't think that was the case from the DUP. What we said in January, and what I said, and I am absolutely clear about this, is that we had to try and make it work because that was what was being presented to us.
But you thought it could work, didn't you?
Well, we tried to make it work. And I think we showed absolutely good faith.
But the rhetoric has changed, and some people think it's been fired up by Boris Johnson and David Frost.
It hasn't been fired up by anybody. We said right from the start, when this was agreed before it became operational, that it was going to prove very, very difficult, and so it has proven to be.
Her successors in unionist politics say the EU proposals are a start, but must go much further. The EU says it's hoping its proposals are the basis for a deal, but it's preparing for the worst. And what that would mean for the EU would be preparing for trade wars, and there is much talk that they are already assembling the instruments of torture which would cause maximum political impact on the Boris Johnson government if it were to come to that. Sources inside the British government are saying there are nothing like enough dropped regulations, rules, checks in what they've seen so far of the EU proposals. And, of course, they want the European Court of Justice, as was announced in the summer and repeated recently, out of the picture. But if you look at possible ways round that, arbitration panels and the rest of it, some people think, looking at all of this, the two sides are potentially in touching distance. The EU, by the way, thinks it can maybe use opinion amongst Northern Ireland businesses who they think they might have satisfied with some of these proposals to put pressure on Northern Ireland politicians. How long does all of this go on for? Well, there are 3 weeks scheduled for the first phase of intensive talks, but I spoke to one senior figure in Number 10 who said they could see this whole thing going on for about 3 years.
Goodness gracious, that'll keep you busy. Gary, thanks very much. Well, joining me now from Brussels is the European Commissioner and former Irish MEP, Mairead McGuinness. Thank you very much for coming back on our programme, Mairead McGuinness. You know, today the EU made this very grand gesture of dropping the majority of the checks on the Irish Sea. Why didn't you do that months ago?
Well, look, what we did today was as a result of listening to business and communities in Northern Ireland. And if you listen to my colleague Maroš Šefčovič, I mean, he genuinely went to Northern Ireland and heard the practical problems and has come up today with, which I think is a very generous offer, trying to solve those practical problems. It would have been great if it had been done from the very start, that we could have had this communication. Now we've had it and now we have solutions. And for me, this is a good day because it reflects the European Union's ongoing commitment to the people of Northern Ireland, to the business community. And also what we want to do is allow the communities and businesses in Northern Ireland, you know, unlock the potential of access to the single market. This is a unique opportunity in my lifetime for Northern Ireland. I think this is a particularly important moment where business can prosper now that we have these proposals on the table.
Right, but we knew about these problems at the beginning of the year. That's when the sausage wars started. If this thing had been done much, much earlier, the mood music would have been a lot more positive.
Well, look, I think you and I have been talking about mood music for years because Brexit happened in 2016. I think it's really important to look at today, where we're at, where we need to be, and how together with the United Kingdom we can work towards solving these problems. Today, these proposals are put forward not as an ultimatum, but rather as part of a discussion. And you mentioned 3 years or 3 weeks, but let's be very frank here. Northern Ireland needs certainty this year. I would love to see this being resolved, and I think it can be within this year, and that we move on and that we have a better relationship going forward so we can regret the past. There are many things in the past that we all should regret, but I think we should look forward now, not for our own, if you like, perspectives, but from the point of view of Northern Ireland. And for me, this was a turning point. Maroš Šefčovič spent time listening, hearing the practical problems, and then he worked hard with the Member States and the European Parliament to find practical solutions. And that was, you know, hard work, but it has delivered a very concrete package.
But there is also an issue, an ongoing issue of trust. So when Dominic Cummings, the former senior advisor to the Prime Minister, says today, as he did, that we never intended to honour this agreement that we signed, cheating foreigners, you know, is the name of the game. What's your response to that? Do you believe him?
Well, I don't. I mean, I read it, and very colourful language that I heard in my earpiece this evening. I mean, Dominic Cummings, he has form, I suppose. He knows the Prime Minister. It's hard to know what to believe. I want to believe the best of people, so let me just move on with that in mind and say that there is a concern. You mentioned trust. It's really important that we establish trust, and I think today we can do that. And I feel the reaction in Northern Ireland is positive, but obviously there are questions. And I think the reaction in the UK, I hope, is of that same frame. So look, we've been in a difficult place. Now is an opportunity to move forward. And whether, you know, people acted in good faith or not, we can't judge the UK side. But hand on heart, I can say from the EU side, we negotiated in good faith because we wanted to solve problems with Northern Ireland's particular situation. And we offered, and we have it now on the table to work through the details, access to the single market, which business in Northern Ireland welcome. And of course, Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. That trade flow will now be easier with these proposals. So I think if we all kept baggage and listened and read to some of the colourful language and phrases being used, we would not make progress. But here in the European Union, every single day we wake up to make compromises, to provide solutions for difficult problems. And we hope that this package is seen in that light.
Right.
And my sense is, and I hope I have a good instinct here, is that this is a turning point.
But you talked about compromises. Is it also possible that that line that is still described as very red, which means that the EU insists on the European Court of Justice having the final say, might also become a pink line, might also be somewhat muddied?
Well, I think I don't want to do red or pink or anything. I'd rather, talk about maybe amber and moving towards green. The truth of the European Court, and I think everybody knows this, it protects the single market. And in fact, it's good for Northern Ireland business that
but could you compromise on it too?
When they're trading with the European Union. But I mean, what would the compromise be? I don't see one, and nor do I see it as such a huge issue. I think when Marosh was in Northern Ireland, it was mentioned by one person in the many meetings that he held. And if I looked at some reaction this evening from business, they are also saying, look, it's the practical issues. We need to find solutions. They're not saying that this package is everything, but there's certainly a positive reaction to it. And they're not talking about the European Court. Okay. One of the things that we need to do at some point is to say what we're actually trying to solve and not find a problem out of every solution. There are those who will do that, but I think the majority of us on our side, and I hope on the UK side, see this as an opportunity to solve something that certainly is problematic, but to solve it in a good way for the people of Northern Ireland. And I thought it was very profound, the words of my colleague Marosh, where he spoke about his concerns for Northern Ireland, its people and businesses. And in that frame, I think the UK and the European Union can work together, despite all of the other tweets and other sound bites that we have to listen to, but perhaps not absorb.
We'll leave the tweets to one side. Mairead McGuinness, thank you very much for coming on the programme.